Get ready, folks. Geometry is going to get real complicated from here on out, and I can only imagine the technological advancements now that we have another dimension. It's scary to think about. Well, basically, in 2071, an infinite source of energy is discovered, which instantly solves all of the world's energy problems. It's dubbed as Dimension W, and as the name implies, it essentially exists beyond the X, Y, and Z planes. Plus, the only way to acquire some of that juicy infinite energy is through the use of cross-dimensional electric field inductors, otherwise known as coils. They're developed by a company which is now the largest enterprise in the world. As for its name, it's called the new Tesla Energy. However, when you have a way of snagging literal infinite energy, some people are definitely going to use that power for their selfish gains. That goes not just for the criminals, but also the elite. Fortunately, there's an old school guy named Kilma, who hates coils and still runs his car with gasoline. He's a valuable man who helps the authorities try and capture the criminals who are abusing the power of coils. Of course, those illegal coils are also meant to be retrieved. He's part of an organization called Recovery House, who gets commissioned by New Tesla Energy to reacquire the illegal coils. One day, just like many other days, the head of the Recovery House, named Mary, calls Kilma to go and wreck a local gang who has somehow gotten their hands on a coil. It's business as usual for Kilma. He gets to it, but when he sees them trying to take advantage of a girl they had just abducted, he steps up as any gentleman would and starts destroying all of them one by one. As a last resort, one of them tries to use the girl as a shield, but looks like she's no ordinary girl. She single-handedly wrecks the guy and reveals that she's an android. Maybe it's because Kilma had seen too much, or because she's a tsundere, but she just slaps him so hard he's suddenly unconscious, and then runs away with those coils. When Kilma opens his eyes again, a good old buddy named Albert's there, ready to talk some sense into him for falling asleep on his job. Kilma instantly gets on the move to capture the girl and get those coils back. He catches up to her before long and apprehends the girl. Subsequently, Albert discovers the current whereabouts of Dr. Shido Yurizaki, the man who essentially founded New Tesla Energy, but looks like he has a strong animosity towards his own company. So much so that instead of negotiations, he chooses to activate a device that lets loose all of the coils nearby. Apparently, the Dimension Administration Investigation Bureau sneaked into his place this one time in order to steal some data. But during the invasion, they also killed his wife and daughter. Since then, he has understandably lost faith in the authorities. And so, when he uses that device, suddenly green lights start illuminating within a large radius, and the android girl experiences a total malfunction. The doctor himself also implodes because he had one of those right on him. Anyways, Kilma wasn't just going to let the android girl get completely shut down. He takes her back to Mary's laboratory, where a quirky technician named Kurogi replaces her core with a different one and turns her on. She wakes up with not enough clothing, gets embarrassed, and then makes a sincere request to let her be one of the collectors too. Her name is Mira Yurizaki, and she's supposedly the daughter of the man who blew himself up a few minutes ago. That's right, Dr. Shido. After a sentimental moment, it's time for the next mission. They head to a museum where there's a publicized event of a masked art thief who's built quite a reputation for never succeeding in his heists ever. They call him the Loser. Now, while Mira looks into Loser's data, Kilma shows up at the museum and faces Loser. There was some degree of familiarity between them, and sure enough, Loser tells Kilma that he knows about his past. Plus, he also shows his face beneath the mask. Not gonna lie, poor guy literally looks like the colossal titan. New Tesla did this to him, and they also took the life of his wife. He then states that a certain art piece contains what he's looking for, one of those coils called the numbers. Of course, the curator of all these glorious art pieces wasn't having any of this chaos. He sends his robotic dolls after them, but Kilma easily knocks both of them out by attacking their coils with pinpoint accuracy. As for Loser, he gets what he was looking for and makes his escape after bidding farewell to Kilma. By this point, the curator was wetting his pants because the illegal coils that he used to run the dolls were now revealed. He gets anxious and messes up, which causes an instant dimensional collapse. His body starts cloning itself, and these numerous body parts merge with the stature of the dolls. All of this results in a horrible mess that looks like it's straight out of a horror movie. On the other hand, Mira confronted Loser's assistant and daughter named Elizabeth, or Ellie for short. In doing so, she also got her hands on their robotic surveillance pigeons. Later, when Mira and Kilma are back at the recovery house, Mary rewards Mira with 6 million yen for confiscating those pigeons. Our girl's excited to have such deep pockets. She goes with Kilma to buy her very own trailer so that she can now have her own private space. They go through through with a solid purchase and she starts tidying up her new home, only to then get distracted by 4 kids who are playing in the auto yard. They appear to be in danger when a stack of worthless cars collapses on them. She immediately uses her superior athletic skills as an android to save them from getting completely crushed, but in doing so, she also gives away the fact that she's a robot. Yikes. Kyoma, on the other hand, goes to see someone named Dondendo, who has information about the coils called numbers. As it turns out, they were the initial prototypes that the new Tesla Energy created. However, since they were too unstable and potent, company was quick to discard them in order to then create more stable ones. Following this meeting, Kyoma gets into some trouble with the police because, why not, but is bailed thanks to the word of a chief operations officer named Claire Skyheart. She's also the grandmother of one of those kids. Speaking of the kids, they later visit Mira and become close friends with her. Of course, they also tell her that her secret is safe with them. Meanwhile, Albert talks to Claire Skyheart about the final report of the Dr. Shido incident. And so, just like that, they move on to a new mission for Kyoma. He has to investigate a mysterious turn of events that have been happening on a remote hotel near Yasogami Lake. The lake also has quite a reputation for being haunted. Add to that the fact that recently a novelist named Shijiro Sakaki literally died from drowning while still in his room, and suddenly all those rumors about ghost sightings start seeming true. Sure enough, there are ghosts. And just when they're on their way there, Mira gets somewhat scared at the sight of what seems to be a ghost. Yep, isn't she the cutest? Kyoma and Mira look into the situation at the hotel. Mira decides to scan the novelist's books and finds dreadful ghost stories, while Kyoma visits a nearby dam which was built around 21 years ago. Apparently the dam, the stories, the lake, and the death by drowning all seem to be connected to one particular thing that happened in the past. Albert then tells Kyoma that a student named Hirama Enemori was here a decade ago along with some other students. She activated number 189, and when 2 search parties were sent to recover her and the coil, they also died. Now, after all these years, these ghost sightings have somehow returned. Once again, remember the quirky girl who saved Mira from complete shutdown? Well, she looks into a household robot's memory to try to discover how Shijiro died, and it looks like he was attacked by hazy humanoid figures. Then there's Mira. When she's done taking her bath, she somehow finds herself trapped in a trance which is both the past and the present. Looks like she's now inside something like the novelist's horror novels. Then she's attacked by a ghost before she had the opportunity to dress herself. As this goes on, another death is reported, and this time it was a random journalist who drowned in a van. Remember Loser's daughter, Elizabeth? She's also at the scene as a recovery agent. Now Shijiro's sister is currently inside her room, when she's suddenly abducted by her other guests. At this point, nothing makes sense. Just what's going on? As for Mira, when she opens her eyes, she is all shackled, and poor guy still didn't let her dress herself. She sees a guy named Shido Kamiki in front of her together with a girl. He's among those who died during the coil search all those years ago. But the man himself states that he's Shijiro Sakaki. He goes on to state that all he wants to do is to protect this world, and so he's ready to eliminate anyone who is presumably a threat at any time. Suddenly, those same figures that were seen in Robert's memories pop up in the hotel and start attacking people. In the middle of it all, Kyoma observes how the bottled water is related to their behavior. Albert helps this observation by triggering fire sprinklers. Mira, on the other hand, uses the power of her own free thinking to free herself of the shackles of this alternate world. She's realized what's going on. She explains to Kyoma that number 189 is currently inside the dam, and this coil has somehow created an alternate reality in Dimension W about the events of the flooding that happened when the coil went lost 10 years ago. The root cause of it all is Shiro himself. As it turns out, back then Shiro managed to save the other students but couldn't save a girl named Marisa. This was too much for him to process, so much so that he used number 189 to keep himself and his friends alive in the alternate world. Kyoma then takes Shiro on in a brutal brawl, while Mira destroys Shiro's perception of reality, and then she proceeds to destroy the alternate reality and everyone in it by powering down number 189. Moving on, the CEO of a robot manufacturing company named Salba Tabetsi arrives in Japan together with one of the COOs of New Tesla Energy. Salba's younger brother, Ruwai, is also with them. They are royalty who have come from Africa for important matters, but Ruwai is more interested in exploring Japan Japan it seems, and he goes off on his own to see what's out there and quickly runs into Kyoma. Kyoma usually wears traditional Japanese clothes, which leads to Ruai mistaking him as a samurai. There's a quick scuffle against bodyguards and transformable motorcycles, during which Kyoma realizes that Ruai has an artificial body. Anyway, Kyoma and Ruai look like they'll get along. He takes the prince to a kimono shop, which is run by his supposed big sister named Tsubaki Azumaya. She gives him a traditional coat. Things are somewhat awkward here, mostly because Kyoma has an unusual memory disorder, which makes it pretty much impossible for him to recall a certain event. Something peculiar happened to his fiancée, Miyabi Azumaya, when she died of an incurable illness. It was a dreadful period of time for both Kyoma and Tsubaki. As this goes on, Salba's beautiful retainer, Lashiti, shows up at the scene to pick up Ruai, and then Ruai is sent to Mary's house. This is where things take an interesting turn. Ruai attacks Mary's bodyguard, leaves behind a mess and also a letter containing a challenge for collectors. A challenge which will take place in the ruins of Easter Island in 7 days. Salba was orchestrating something big. In his words, he says that he'll start a war himself so that they can avoid another war later. Back to Kyoma and what happened to his almost wife. In his early days, he was madly in love with Miyabi, which is why when he learned about her illness, he joined a special unit called Grendel and made a deal with Dr. Shido's wife, Sarah Uezaki. He was ready to go to any length possible in order to save her. However, in a sudden turn of events, their unit was sent back to go check some facilities on Easter Island. And during this operation, the biggest ever dimensional malfunction happened. The sad thing about this is how Kyoma has no recollection of what exactly happened. They apparently succeeded, but the surgery of his fiancée didn't go as planned, and she died. And so, regardless of the fact that he lost his memory, he still bears an unquenchable hatred for the coils, and this new technology that took the life of the woman whom he loved the most. Meanwhile, in the present, Salba tells New Tesla Energy that she has sent some folks to investigate what exactly is going on at Easter Island. It's all for the sake of the prosperity of the company. It's a big job. We're talking about $50 million. All they need to do is go to the island and get a certain coil from the island. Some collectors take an airship, but the weather had other plans, so they crash and die. Conveniently, Kyoma and Mira were also on their way there, but Albert makes sure that they go through a different route. They safely land on the island, the duo gets into a sports car and dashes straight towards the research facility where the disaster took place all that time ago. Here, we jump away from the plot to a flashback where it turns out that the Salba isn't actually the real son of the king. He's an adopted one. However, the king soon had a real one, who is, of course, Ruai. Back in their early days, Salba talked to Ruai about his dream of a new world where Ruai is the king. Alright, back to the plot. A few sketchy yet intimidating individuals also came ashore. We'll refer to them as Yuri, Hiro, Hitman, and Cassidy. Together with Ruai, they all carry Salba, Lashidi, and one more, all three of whom are currently in coma. They take them to a shelter. Following this, Ruai plays footage that explains the rules of the challenge. Suddenly, the null created from that coil lets out large shielded robots who reactivate and then start attacking left and right. Kyoma and Mira team up with two others, namely Harry and Debbie, to take down a single robot. They're near the vicinity of nothingness, which is basically the coil's domain. Of course, Kyoma's subconscious mind still has PTSD from what happened. He somehow brings forth enough willpower to keep moving forward, only to then be confronted by Loser himself. The last time, Loser wasn't so confrontive when he met Kyoma. However, this time, he wants the guy to stop chickening out and actually recall what he did during that destruction. They're still in the middle of their conversation when the sphere of nothingness pops up again and causes Kyoma to fall unconscious. Just what is this? Conqueror's hockey? Suddenly, it's like Kyoma's about to relive his past of the time when their unit was sent to Salba's kingdom, called Isla, to protect New Tesla Energy and Salba through a revolt. Looks like Salba is reliving these memories as well. But a dangerous scientist named Haruka Seemeyer orchestrated the situation in a way that caused Ruai to be struck in the crossfire launched by Salba's war machines. Much to Salba's dismay, his little brother couldn't get out of the situation in time. As it later turned out, Haruka Seemeyer is a former student of Dr. Shido, who was actively going up against the New Tesla Energy together with some other students. Kyoma's unit was then tasked to hunt down this mad sad lad. Back in the present, Loser and his daughter Elizabeth, or should I say Ellie, start exploring the laboratory. They go deep inside the vicinity of this lab, straight to a place where Loser was once a researcher named Julian Tyler. All this time, Kilma still hasn't figured out that he's trapped in a world of illusions, doomed to relive his past. Although when he does realize, the sphere starts approaching him once again, and believe it or not, the sphere actually has C. Meyer inside itself. He also has some interest in Kilma's memories because Kilma should know what happened back then. Subsequently, back in the real world, Mira is trying her hardest to make sure that Kilma's physical body isn't completely done and dusted while he's still unconscious. Fortunately, Kilma soon regains his consciousness right when Mira was finally about to lose herself to nothingness. As for how he finally managed to wake up, well, apparently he had a secret implant warped in his earlobe. And considering how all memories are connected through dimensions, when he took off the implant, he somehow returned back. Then Ruwai appears before them, all damaged and tainted. He explains that Hitman and the now mind-controlled Yuri are both trying to take his life. Kilma and the others then face off against the Hitman, who explains that he's only here to make sure that no one gets the coil hidden on this island. Yuri then shows up to attack. Well, Yuri's currently getting mind-controlled by Hitman after all. The intensity of the situation causes the gang to get separated. Kilma ends up getting forced to fight one of his former teammates from back in the day, a man named Douglas Marks. He'd rather not fight him, but the guy's getting mind-controlled by Hitman. Luckily, Kilma manages to destroy Douglas's control device, and just like that, he wins. This causes Hitman to bail, but just when things couldn't have gotten any more intense, the Hitman kills Ruwai, just like how Hitmen are supposed to be. Kilma loses it. He goes off the ledge and tries to kill the Hitman, but Mira stops him from getting killed as well, and then a second Ruwai appears. You just got bamboozled. Back inside, Loser manages to defeat the hero and takes the number 001 for himself. But he doesn't stop there. He begins to go even deeper into his former laboratory. Meanwhile, at the scene, Ruwai explains what's going on. He has multiple bodies, which he can remotely jump in and out of while he's still back at home. He then goes and wakes Salba up. Salba then joins our gang and declares that his goal is to find Genesis, a coil that is literally capable of ignoring the laws of physics. It can just create something from nothing. And Salba plans on using it to regenerate Ruwai's actual body. Glad we have another Edward searching for a Philosopher's Stone. Anyway, while everyone tries to hold off the robots, Kilma, Mira, Salba, and his beautiful retainer named Lashidi all enter that laboratory. Soon enough, they come across Loser, who reveals that he was the researcher here until the malfunction. He then uses number 6 to broadcast a memory from the past, where the Dr. Shido and evil scientist Hakuba Seemeyer all worked together to create Genesis. But because it was too much, Dr. Shido ultimately let go of the project. However, Seemeyer wasn't going to have any of that. He goes rogue and starts developing his own Genesis. He's completely absorbed in the project, to the point that he uses other scientists as guinea pigs. Right now, Seemeyer is trapped in a pocket dimension, ranting about how it was Kilma who took this Genesis away from him, hence in turn causing the entire incident. Now we know that Loser also lost his wife, and the cause of it was Seemeyer. There, Loser questions Seemeyer about what he did to his wife, and in reply, Seemeyer states that he was trying to ruin his plans, and so he simply turned her into a giant monster, whom Loser now has to fight. Of course, he doesn't stand a chance of fighting his wife, much less a giant monster. Kilma, on the other hand, suddenly starts feeling genuinely guilty about everything. However, what Mira tells him next changes his mind. All of the pieces of information helped Mira put 2 and 2 together as well. If it weren't for Kilma and his fiancée Miyabi, she would never have been born in the first place. Why? Well, it's because she was created to be Miyabi's replacement body, until the surgery went wrong. Realizing this, Kilma lets Mira into his mind so that she can help restore his memories. The next time he wakes up, everyone's ready to fight by his side in order to put an end to Seemeyer once and for all. In the wake of this, Mira's coils begin to heat up, so she starts running away from everyone after realizing that she'll implode. But this gives Seemeyer the opportunity to capture her. While finally everything becomes clear now that Kilma has regained his memories, he himself asks Seemeyer to look into his memories. Back then, his fiancée simply refused to go through the surgery because it would involve the use of Genesis. And since Kilma was man enough to respect her wishes, he went ahead and destroyed it. Now, Haruka Seemeyer simply couldn't comprehend a stupidity of this level. He goes insane with rage, but rage distorts your judgment, which is why the power of friendship between Kilma and everyone else puts an end to him. In his final moments, he recalls his former tutor, Dr. Shido, before passing away for good. But things hadn't gone back to normal yet. Mira's coil was on the verge of exploding, and she had just about entered the other dimension. But since she was so close to the other dimension, her father, Dr. Shido, appears and presents a new coil. When the dust settles, it seems Loser has passed away as well. His daughter, Ellie, cries out in agony. The void of nothingness is gone, and so nature spurts on the island once again. This is shown by a flower on a random rock. In the days succeeding this event, Salba, Ruwai, and Lashidi head back to their land. Ellie starts operating independently. As for our protagonists, Kilma and Mira also continue their work as collectors. That's right, this anime may have ended here, but they gotta keep working if they want to keep their jobs. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.